The drama at the Washington Post is just unrelenting. In the long line of recent resignations, longtime columnist Ruth Marcus added her name to the list on Monday. Why? Marcus said she wrote a column criticizing owner Jeff Bezos' move last month to shift the opinion page to focus solely on free markets and civil liberties. Marcus alleged that CEO and publisher Will Lewis killed her column. In her resignation letter, Marcus wrote, "Jeff's announcement that the opinion section will henceforth not publish views that deviate from the pillars of individual liberties and free markets threatens to break the trust of readers that columnists are writing what they believe, not what the owner has deemed acceptable. Will's decision not to run the column that I wrote, respectfully dissenting from Jeff's edict, something I have not experienced in almost 2 decades of column writing, underscores that the traditional freedom of columnists to select the topics they wish to address and say what they think has been dangerously eroded." But wait, there's more. Axios reported yesterday that the Post was overhauling its entire newsroom structure. The Post is dividing up its national desk into 2 parts, one focusing on politics and government, the other focusing on national reporting. Executive editor Matt Murray wrote that politics and government coverage remain a central pillar for the Post. The national desk will focus on covering important issues and figures outside of Washington. Murray wrote on Monday, quote, "It is time of change across the Post, including for our colleagues in the company, and in opinion, this is a big effort involving all of us, and it is disruptive. There will be some confusion, even some mistakes. Candidly, I realize it may not be for everyone." Drama at the Post kicked off right before the election after Bezos chose not to run the editorial endorsing then presidential candidate Kamala Harris, and it ramped up when the tech billionaire cozied up to President Trump at the inauguration. Meanwhile, Semaphore reports Monday that the New York Times was also making big changes. The Gray Lady is apparently shaking up its opinion section. Per Semaphore, senior editors and publisher A.G. Sulzberger is debating whether they should publish fewer editorials that are, in their view, higher quality. New York Times is also weighing whether it should endorse candidates in more races. It has also tasked staffers like editor Bill Brink and the graphics team to rethink what an endorsement looks like. 2020 Free Press founder Barry Weiss left the New York Times. In her resignation letter, she said that the outlet's views are concerns were, quote, profoundly removed from the lives of most people. Moreover, that same year, Senator Tom Cotton had written an op-ed for the Times titled "Send in the Troops." It was a reference to the 2020 riots after the death of George Floyd, who had, of course, died in police custody. And after much scrutiny, the Times issued an editor's note saying Cotton's piece did not meet their standards. The incident led to opinion editor James Bennett stepping down. Jonathan Last, editor of The Bulwark, wrote on Blue Sky, "Every honorable journalist at the Washington Post is in an untenable position as long as Will Lewis remains in his job." That's the liberal verdict. Political commentator John Podhoretz, on the other hand, wrote on X, "However, will America survive without the constant whining of Ruth Marcus in the pages of the Washington Post?" Which is an attitude a little closer to my own. I was no particular fan of Ruth Marcus, although she was not my least favorite Washington Post columnist. That, of course, a distinction that belonged to dear, dear Jennifer Rubin, who left before all of this went down. I've said when I covered this previously that, Jeff Bezos does own the paper, so he can do what he wants with it. And look, I think people, employees should be free, obviously, to weigh in and express their ideas, and that's an important facet of what we do. There are not all that many employers out in the world who are going to let you just, pontificate against the person who pays your paycheck and is going to keep doing it, right? That's just the reality.
Very predictable of you to see it that way, Robby. Of course, you think that ownership is everything. I think that the ethics, especially in journalism, is a big thing. You're not a fan of Ruth Marcus. Let me tell you what I'm not a fan of: outright oligarchy, and that's what we're talking about here. The bigger story has to do with the relationship between Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post between the time that he bought it and how he behaved for several years versus this way that so many people have changed. People who took a much more straight up attitude about the rights of Americans, who all of a sudden, because they have some proximity to power, because of their own business interests in terms of Donald Trump and his approval, have just changed on a dime. And that is what has happened to Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos used to be out and proud about the fact that, hey, what the paper does is what the paper needs to do. As the owner, I'm not going to meddle. And that is the ethical relationship between the owner of a paper like that and the newsroom. And it's very sad to see what's happening, and I totally support the ethical voices of those. Oh, you're smirking. You're smirking at the idea. Oh, yes, you are.
You have an ethical obligation to purchase something and then have no oversight over how it operates?
When it comes to something like major newspapers in the country, yes, it has been an established tradition and ethical principle that those who are the owners of newspapers such as that will take a hands-off approach.
That's not true. Think of yellow journalism.
Right to their opinion. But this is
William
more than
Randolph. There has always been incredible direction from the people in charge and the owners and the business interests of the news. That has always and in every instance.
I'm not to say. This is not to say there should be no influence. This is not to say there should be no opinion. But the way he is acting now, actually saying that there will be no opinion pieces that don't support personal liberties and the free market.
He didn't say there'd be no opinion pieces. He said that would be the opinion of, that would be the editorial voice of the page. I mean, the New York Times, the Washington Post, newspapers have an editorial that speaks from the paper's position, which obviously is ideological. So that's going to be the position of the owner. He's in favor of, he says, personal liberties and free markets. That happens to be my ideology, so I think it's good to promote those things. If he's going to decline to run, just guest opinion pieces that are on some other topic, yeah, I would certainly. That doesn't make sense to me. That just sounds kind of boring. I would criticize that as well. This wasn't declining to run an opinion piece on some dissenting. That was declining to run criticism of the paper itself, which is a facet of basically every. I mean, the New York Times doesn't and never has printed, is going to print like, a criticism of itself necessarily. I mean, sometimes you have a public editor, right, who has that role exactly, and they do that.
Well, a lot of people have resigned already in protest of this, and I think it's important that the American people recognize this is an issue of oligarchy. This is the issue of what happens when billionaires can have, with their money, so much power in so many sectors of our society that other voices simply cannot get in.
Well, let me say one other thing that I think you will agree with.
Okay.
Let this then be an advertisement for independent media and the new opportunities that have arisen for journalists, reporters, entertainments, content creators, influencers, whatever you want to call them, to be free of this kind of oversight or control, whatever you want to call it, and just post, write, speak, do video directly on social media or on a platform like Substack or Rumble that makes very explicit guarantees to the people on it that we're not going to muzzle you even if we hate what you're saying. And that has been allowed to flourish in our new internet economy. And while I'm doing a show that's part of a large corporate media organization that gives me tremendous freedom that I'm very grateful for, I'm encouraging and happy about this trend that allows people to express dissenting views and not have the exact kind of problem we're describing. Because I agree with you, it can be a problem. And that's a good thing that has only existed in recent times. This power was not available previously, and that is a good thing, is it not?
Absolutely. I certainly agree with you that the rise of independent media does matter for exactly the reasons you said. But that, to me, does not mean that we should not be concerned about the ethical principles involved in the legacy media as well. And we all know what's going on here with Jeff Bezos, his sucking up to the president in a way that he was not known to do before. And that's not only him, it's also Zuckerberg. It's the trend these days. Proximity to power, particularly with the Trump administration, given that Trump makes his feelings known about things that presidents traditionally do not make their feelings known about. He doesn't care about transgressing the norms and the traditions.
President Biden was happy to order around, particularly the social media companies. I've talked about it so much. Was furious with editorial choices or lack thereof that social media companies
COVID?
were making. Railed against them all the time. Yeah. And I think that was unfortunate. And Trump maybe has taken that ball and run with it. And
run with
I think he should not do that. But
way down the field.
Yeah.
But we'll see what
Biden
happens. In the meantime,
fast.
Everybody be aware. Billionaires simply should not have this kind of power. It means by definition that you, the American people, all of us, the American people, will have less voice in the affairs of the nation. That's a terrible thing to happen in the United States.
We've got one more spicy topic to debate today. Coming up, Dylan Mulvaney made an appearance on The View. You won't want to miss our discussion of that. More Rising right after this.